So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, to the folks joining in from different parts of the world. Very, very excited to host and kick off our session for today, the era of intelligent testing, transforming testers into skilled SDETs. So I'm your host for today. My name is Rahul Akkanpal. I'm a senior manager here at BrowserStack as part of the product marketing function, been with the company for almost 2 years. And prior to that, had worked for companies like Workday and SAP. That was my time there. And I'm again very happy to have my co-presenter and the lead speaker for today's session, Siddhant Wadhwani, who's also the SDET manager at Newfold Digital. I'll leave the introductions to him in a few minutes as I make the transitions and hand it over to Siddhant. Before we jump into the session, a few housekeeping items. This is going to be a 1 hour long session. All the participants will be muted such that we don't have any background interruptions. But at any point in time, if you have any questions during my or Siddhant's section, feel free to ask your questions in the chat window or the Q&A window, and we will try to address those questions live during the end of the session. So we are reserving a 10 to 15-minute window towards the end of the session to address your questions. And in case we are unable to answer those live, we will try to send it out via an email. This session is being recorded, so for if any reasons you need to drop off, the recording will be available on BrowserStack site for you to listen in later on. And again, regardless, you will still be getting the recording as well. So before handing it over to Siddhant, a little bit of an introduction about BrowserStack. We are the world's leading software testing platform. And this journey for BrowserStack started almost 11 years back in 2011, when our co-founders Nakul Agrawal and Ritesh Arora co-founded BrowserStack. In the first year itself, BrowserStack grew to over 1,000 customers, and the momentum over the next 10 years really didn't slow down. So fast forward 10 years, we are currently at more than 50,000 customers. And along the ways, we've launched several new products, both in the manual, the automation, and the visual testing space. We've acquired companies like Percy. We've had some great funding rounds that has kind of really helped us grow and invest more in our products as well. And it's been a great journey so far. So we've added 1,000 employees across 4 global locations, right? And very quickly, an overview of what BrowserStack currently offers. As I mentioned earlier, we have applications on the manual testing side, such as Live and App Live, on the automation testing, such as Automate, App Automate, and Percy for those of you who are interested in visual testing. And then in addition to that, we offer free tools to the different developers and the community out there as well. And when I said we are the world's largest testing platform, this is just some of the proof points and validations of how large our scale is. We currently have over 6 million registered users. Every single year, we have over 72 billion Selenium commands being run on our platform. And we are a truly, truly global company with customers across more than 135 countries. And to ensure that you are not experiencing any latencies, we have 19 globally distributed data centers, because we know how important speed is for you and your teams. And not only do we have like small individual developers perhaps working from the garages or a small startup place, but we are also able to manage and help some of the largest and the most complex customers across the world, across several different industries, from technology to oil and gas like Shell, to banking like Wells Fargo, to some of the largest manufacturing companies in the world like General Electric. So with that, before I hand it over to Siddhant, typically what we like to do is start out with a poll. So would love to see if you guys would like participate in this poll. There are 2 ways to participate. The first one is through the QR code at the top of the screen. And then the other option is if you just can go on to slido.com and enter the code. What we would like to hear as we kind of like jump into the session is, what do you guys think should be the ideal developer and the testers ratio in your organization and your teams, right? So we're just going to give folks a few minutes to see the poll and see kind of like, what preferences folks have across that. right? Okay, so we see a few more results coming in, but clearly, I think the 3:1 is probably the most popular one. Seems like a lot of folks don't really believe in the 1:1 or 5:1, which makes sense, right? Awesome. And I think, like, the results seem like a small population do believe in the fact that it really doesn't matter. And we really don't want to go in with the fixed ratio in terms of the developer to the testers within the organization. So I'm just going to pause there for a bit and would love to hand it over to Siddhant to introduce himself and to share more about the session topic. So Siddhant, over to you.
Yeah, I hope my screen is visible, Rahul.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So yeah, interesting to see those polls of 3:1. Really cool insights. But I mean, the reason why we have covered this poll, I'll cover it during the slides. So, firstly, thank you so much, Rahul, for the quick introduction. It's great to see BrowserStack capturing the market, and like those who haven't like explored BrowserStack, I encourage them to definitely try it out. Apart from that, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And it gives me immense pleasure that I can share this time with you all from across different time zones and locations. So indeed, really great to see and meet most of you. Welcome to today's webinar on the era of intelligent testing, transforming testers into skilled SDETs. As you know, I'll be your speaker for today. And some quick insights about me. So I'm a versatile self-directed leader with over 7 years of experience in the IT industry. Presently, I work at Newfold Digital as a project lead SDET manager, managing SDETs across several teams within APAC engineering. And this is mainly focused towards test excellence and automation excellence. Recently, I was also recognized as a BrowserStack champion, and I have also been a key speaker at various tech conferences. In my spare time, I love attending tech conferences and also traveling to explore new places in the world. So yeah, that's me. And if you wish to know more, you can definitely visit my website. That's siddhantwadhwani.com. And don't forget to follow me via my social media handles. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So just one quick thing, like the housekeeping rule Rahul mentioned. So if you have any questions during the slides, during my presentation, just feel free to pop that over in the Q&A section, and we'll address that towards the end. So let's get started. Let's see what we have for today's agenda. So yeah, just a quick thing. Just give me a sec because my slide is frozen. Rahul, is that visible for you all?
Hey, maybe you want to try refreshing it, Siddhant?
Okay, yeah, it's working. So
Perfect.
yeah, sorry for the inconvenience, but yeah, the agenda for this session basically covers facts about how testing was evolved over the years and how research proves that it's important to upskill your testers in this era of intelligent testing. Next, I'd be highlighting certain life experiences and how I converted certain challenges into opportunities. Third, about the journey of transforming testers into skilled SDETs. So this topic would mostly circle around devising better test strategies, uh, establishing a test center of excellence, tracking essential metrics, and adopting developmental models that would help your team upskill and scale test at scale. Lastly, how as a manager you must adopt various leadership styles to fit among any situation. You can be a role model for your team. Now, just one quick thing. So I've kept this presentation a bit less technical, as most of you would get solutions online. But my main motive behind this session is to know how, as a manager, how as an principal architect, or how as a team lead, you can play a key role by guiding your team to look beyond the horizon. So yeah, with that note, let's start with the topic. So let's take it as a story. Once upon a time, software testing couldn't keep pace with the rapid advances in software development. As most of us know, QA teams struggled during the times of continuous deliveries, leading to significant increase in production defects. And that indirectly led to lowering the team morale due to excessive testing overheads. Now, with your poll that came in, as most of you said, 3:1 is the ratio between developers and testers. Whereas if you see on Google, the ideal ratio should be 5:2. So with recent advancements in technology, innovations, and test automation coming in, QA teams are now able to keep pace with software development. This has also led to an increase in productivity, improved the product quality, as well as raised customer satisfaction levels across the IT industry. And that's where intelligent testing plays an important role in defining certain best practices and guidelines that a team must adhere to, deliver features with optimum quality and agility. With intelligent testing, development cycles shorten and release the process fastens. And according to a McKinsey study, agile teams are 27% more productive than teams that follow other SDLC methodologies. Moreover, a survey by Atlassian suggests that more than 50% of software teams are already using continuous integration and delivery, and about 32% are moving towards a full-fledged CI/CD. Also, more than 50% of organizations push changes to production on a daily basis. By now, I'm sure you've realized that the very first step to transforming your team of testers into skilled SDETs starts with you. So over the course of this webinar, I will discuss in which, as a manager, how you can empower your team to test intelligently and upskill them to test at scale. So here's a quick quote. Automation may be a good thing, but don't forget that it began with Frankenstein. In today's age of fast-paced technology, automation has paved the way to a point where human intervention has become unnecessary. It can save time and money, bring customer satisfaction, along with a better user experience, and impede human error. In a 1994 famous horror film, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the protagonist creates an intelligent life form using inanimate materials. However, far from the perfect artificially created specimen, the result was a hideous creature that caused terrible devastations and consequences. So a quick takeaway from this is, just because you can automate everything or most of the things, it doesn't mean that you should automate everything. In fact, automating the wrong things can definitely cause a ripple effect. So what do you understand by this? Attempting to automate everything puts you at the risk of losing the human touch. Automation is best for common, constant, and systematic tasks that follow a standard pattern. Always, it is ideal that you should start small and identify the errors and correct them as you move forward. Automation is not capable of out-of-the-box thinking, problem solving, or analysis. And for that, you need your human members. So moving on to some of my life's experiences, as you can see, I've divided my life's major events into 5 segments. You can see certain challenges that I faced along the way, and I'll deep dive on how I converted those into opportunities. For the course of this session, I will be talking only about the first 2, and for the remaining 3, we can connect offline, and I'll be happy to share my insights on them. So starting with the first segment, career and role transitions. As most of you know me personally, or by now, you would know that I have started my career as a developer, moved on into testing and product management, and finally from an individual contributor role of within testing to now an estate manager. I strongly believe most of you have already been through a similar phase. If not, then be ready. Across each of these transitions, there were multiple challenges that came by. But then how I was able to convert these challenges into opportunities is what I'll be talking shortly. But as you can see on the image towards the left, despite multiple challenges, few folks have managed to reach the top. Some may have taken a bit of help from others. Some may have found different alternatives to reach the top faster. Whereas there are a few who are still at the position where they feel that exact position is the top. But is that so? That's what's called the comfort zone. And don't get me wrong, in order to go beyond your comfort zone, it doesn't mean you have to compromise on your work-life balance. there are multiple techniques through which you can attain greater heights that you would have only dreamt of. For example, one such technique is the Eisenhower decision matrix, where you can factor urgency versus importance, and accordingly, you can prioritize your works in much smarter ways and manage your time efficiently. Next, I'll be talking about the second segment. If you notice carefully, I'm focusing on the word self-initiative to learn, grow, and excel. To date, I've had a handful of peers, managers, family, and friends to tell me how to progress in life, both personally and professionally. I've mostly been my own source of inspiration and have always wanted to explore everything possible that interests me. Although this might be going the extra mile at times, but the fruits that I've received towards the end have always been very tasty. Again, this path had its own set of challenges. For example, some folks would think I'm trying to boast about myself by doing some random courses or certifications, etc. But I never paid heed. What the only thought that came to my mind was, what is stopping them to do so? It may be their guilt conscience that's holding them back. And that's something what I'd like to reiterate to all of you, that there would be X number of folks who try to pull you down, maybe because they never aim to do or get there in the first place, or something, there may be some other reason that's completely holding them back. But that's on you then, whether you take that as a challenge and react, or take it as an opportunity and excel. So on the next slide, I'll throw some light on certain challenges that I came across during my career growth and how I converted those into opportunities. So here you can see I've highlighted 6 major challenges that I've gone through, especially during my career role. I believe most of the folks here would have also gone through a few of these, if not all. So let's look at each of these individually. First one being the mindset change. Now the challenge here is the transition from an individual contributor role to a managerial role. And the opportunity that I found in it was the decision from moving from an individual contributor role to a managerial role is first a personal choice than a thrusted decision. It is important that you weigh the pros and cons and know that the team's success is basically your success. So once you master those additional skills like the art of delegation, it gives you additional time to explore new avenues, get involved in discussions at the business level, and at the same time, you can be involved in the decision-making process. Again, nothing stops you from coming back to what's called your comfort zone or safe space. But if you have that inner confidence and zeal to explore, then you've just crossed another level. The next topic is context switching. So the challenge here would be like handling multiple teams, multiple projects, and now with the the work from home situation. So the opportunity here is like, instead of working in silos with the team, you work in tandem with them, block their calendars, have more one-on-ones with them, avoid any kind of ad hoc request, show empathy, and believe me, trust plays a very important factor here. So you need to show certain leadership traits to handle situations better. Multitasking at times may be challenging, but the sooner you master techniques like Pomodoro and various others, your life gets much easier. The next one is sharing constructive feedback. So the challenge here is how does your team deal with negative feedback? And the opportunity is you need to identify smart ways in which you can give critical feedback. One way is the sandwich approach, where you start with a positive feedback, you hide the negative feedback in between, and you end with a positive feedback. So that's your sandwich approach. But my personal recommendation would not be the sandwich approach. It would be more of being a direct managerial with a peer-to-peer feedback. So the person understands much better. And the third approach is a SBI approach, which you may have heard before, situation, behavior, and impact. But again, that's not my personal choice. Fourth one, building team trust. Now, the challenge here is the imposter syndrome. Imagine you have just been transitioned from an individual contributor role to a managerial role. So what kind of challenges would you face? Maybe you would question yourself thinking, am I justifying the new role? But the opportunity here is that first you need to trust yourself, build that inner self-confidence, so that your team can trust you better. You need to actively listen to your team, share more, stand by your team when they are undergoing some kind of difficulty, and take full responsibility about that. It's okay to fail, but it's important to learn from those experiences. Fifth one, the managing stakeholders effectively. So the challenge that comes here is communication gaps. Most of us would have faced that. The opportunity would be identifying the roadblocks early and predict delays. You need to communicate openly across your immediate plus one layers, and also at the same time define standards and processes, but don't forget to refine them over time. And finally, we have reinventing the wheel over and again. I'm sure most of you all in your career would have faced some kind of a reorg or restructuring or shifting from exploring certain new ideas rather than relying on the proven outcomes. So the opportunity here would be at max, you can dedicate about 1 to 2 folks from your team to explore the pros and cons, identify the value in transitioning, and discuss the return on investment. Identify the needs for the shift. Is it project-based, team-based, or the changes need to be done at an org level? Define estimates, and then you need to plan accordingly. And that's where radical candor also plays an important role, where you praise in public and criticize in private. So yeah, after looking at the various challenges and how I was able to convert those into opportunities, let's look at some opportunities that come directly from situations that we discussed before. So the first thing is fast-paced career progression, redefining the comfort zone. So as I mentioned, the more the learning, you reach the stretch zone area, but that too will have its own set of challenges. Like if you go beyond that, obviously you can have some mental stress and stuff, and that's the red zone. So it's good to stretch, but don't stretch over. So yeah, that's it. And then mastering different leadership styles, which we look into towards the end of the slide. Understanding various roles and perspectives. Once you transition into this managerial role, you need to think from a developer's perspective, from a tester's perspective, from a product manager. What how would they react to certain situations, and accordingly factor those in. And lastly, networking with like-minded individuals. Now, after sharing my life's experiences and showing how I converted those into opportunities, I'm sure your immediate reaction would be something like this, where you may feel your guardian angel thinks facepalm. So on the contrary, I'd like you to focus on this quote by Walter Chrysler. Some people create their own opportunities. Some go where opportunities are the greatest, but some fail to realize when especially they are face to face with it. And I'm sure this is pretty self-explanatory. I don't need to dig a bit deeper. So there's another simple and sweet quote by Winston Churchill, where a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity and an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. So yeah, ending with this quote, let's look into the most important topic for today. That is transforming your team of testers into skilled SDETs. For those of you who don't know who an SDET is, the full form is like software development engineer and test. He is basically a person who is involved entirely across the SDLC and the SDLC. That's your software development lifecycle and the software testing lifecycle processes. I'm sure most of you would already know the difference between a tester and an SDET. So I'll skip to the part where I talk about the key benefits from this transition. As you can see, the benefits that I can highlight here are SDETs not only help automate repetitive tasks, but they have really good coding skills. They develop automation scripts and frameworks, contribute to design discussions, code reviews, usability tests, and contribute to code if and when needed. That aids in improving the quality of deliverables and release them in a timely manner. But why? I would really love to hear from folks on this call. Please share your responses in the chat. What is the pain you would cure if you had to implement this approach? At the same time, let me ask another question. Do you think if testers take up the ISTQB course, will they certify or will they qualify as skilled SDETs? Okay. All right. Let me tell you exactly how I planned this entire transition and what specific technique I had in mind. So as you can see, I used a more of a reactive based approach to a cognitive based approach, which I'll be discussing on the next slide. But um, you do need to understand that this kind of a transition doesn't happen overnight. So it needs to be a well-planned journey and it needs to be carried out in appropriate phases. So folks, a quick check. I hope everyone's with me. Okay. A quick wave of hands, right? I hope that's coming in. Okay. All right. So now let's look into the most important part of today's session, transforming testers into skill testers. Well, the technique that I used is a six-phased approach. And if you were to relate it with your current test org, the excellence track, you might find your team placed at any of these layers. Again, to make myself clear, this is not like a one-size-fits-all model where the approach that I have used or the way that I've represented this journey may be exactly what you need in order to align your team and for them to test at scale. There would be multiple factors that you need to factor in, like the type of project, available resources, team bandwidth, efforts, and estimates required, and again, the business needs that come. So let's go over each of these phases. The very first phase is the reactive based approach, where the org doesn't wish to invest in building a dedicated team of testers and assumes developers can do it all. At that point, we see minimal formalized processes and tools in use. Also, automation testing is just a topic for discussion, or UI automation exists to the bare minimum. Next phase is the proactive approach, where we see this is the place where maybe a small team of testers is being formed and certain coding standards and best practices are being laid. The focus from here shifts towards test automation, and this is where you have certain test environments streamlined like a staging environment or a pre-production environment. Next comes the strategic approach, where the team decides to have certain extensive tools and frameworks in place. They start managing test cases better, either by using Zephyr or any other tool, and look into factors like incident management and root cause analysis. Then comes the era of shift left testing, where there's more of in-sprint automation and you shift your testing towards the left, like starting right from the local host or the development environment onwards to production. And test-driven development also plays an important role, especially if you follow the test pyramid. Then comes the DevOps approach, where you have a full-fledged CI/CD in place, and your focus is more towards continuous testing. You start Dockerizing your tests and upskill your team of SDETs. And also, like after you have completed the functional, your complete focus is on functional testing, you now look into areas of debugging logs or monitoring the performance of your product or site. And lastly, once you have factored all these points or the approaches across, the final phase comes is the cognitive approach, where now your mindset switches towards more of non-functional areas or low-code, no-code automation, as well as service virtualization, testing micro front ends, and way beyond. So yeah, that's basically the approach that I use to transform the team of testers into SDETs. But again, the next step in transforming your team, you need to define an ideal test strategy. And again, this could vary depending on various factors. So that could be like the type of applications. It could be legacy applications, microservices, micro front ends. The tech stack could vary, where you have some old Perl code or maybe C code, and maybe some other applications use Golang. So that's another factor. Then you have project requirements, team size, and business needs that again come in. But in the days of single page application frameworks like React, Angular, Ember.js, and others, it became apparent that UI tests don't have to be on the highest level of the pyramid. So you're perfectly able to unit test your UI in all of these frameworks. Thus, the best bet here would be to follow the test pyramid, where you have maximum ground coverage, and then you walk your way right to the top. So as you can see on the left, unit test is where you have more of isolation. And when you walk towards the end-to-end test, it's more of integration. Unit test would definitely cost much cheaper because it's easier to identify defects early, whereas it would be more expensive when you find it at a later point. So it's ideal that you stick to the pyramid shape to come up with a healthy set of test suite. Write lots of small and fast unit tests. Write some more coarse-grained tests and very few high-level tests that test your application from end to end. So let me showcase the strategy that my team used to test a micro front-end application following both the shift left approach and in sprint automation. We basically used a recurring pipeline pattern to trigger the deployment and testing of micro frontends. Each of the independent micro frontends targeted a single repository that contained a suite of end-to-end tests. Now, once the micro frontend was deployed to the development environment, it triggered the end-to-end test, which targeted the same environment where it was deployed. Now, again, this could be either a subset of tests or the entire suite of automation tests. And once these tests run, then it triggered the parent pipeline, which would further deploy the changes onto the next environment. One point to remember here is unit tests and component tests were executed right after the MFE was built and just before it was deployed to the very first environments that, and in this case, is the development environment. Now, towards the right, if you see, if the tests fail, then it would halt the deployment and roll back the changes. If all the tests pass, then the parent pipeline would simply deploy the changes to the next environment, that is maybe the pre-prod or the staging environment, and then accordingly, the changes would be tested on production. All error boundary cases were thought of and handled at the time of test planning phase itself. But a key point to remember here is if you had to implement a good automation test strategy, a more robust approach would be that you run tests without any deployments being made to the same physical environment. Let's look into an ideal dev test ops journey that I came up with. So although this could always vary depending on the product or service or architecture that you have, but this is a generic architecture that most of the teams would ideally follow. So the first phase, as you can see, is the code development. It is basically programming and coding, which circles around people, processes, and tools. People could vary around product owners, designers, architects. Processes would be around SDLC, RAD, Agile, etc. And tools could again vary between designer tools, IDEs like you can have Bitbucket, Jenkins, Jira, certain DevOps tools, etc. The next phase is the continuous integration, where we talk about how would one integrate code to an integration server, like for this example, Jenkins, which provides feedback by running tests, scans, checks, and may involve loop with code development. Developers who practice continuous integration merge their changes back onto the development or the master branch as often as possible. The developer's changes are validated against the current build that runs and running automation tests against those builds. By doing so, you would avoid integration challenges that can happen later. And that would be before merging the changes onto the release branch. Continuous integration puts a great emphasis on automation testing to check that the application does not break whenever new commits are integrated into the master branch. This ensures that if there is a bug or some issue with the feature code, then the developer can fix it quickly. Lastly, we come to the phase of continuous delivery and continuous testing. So that is basically an extension to the continuous integration approach, since it automatically deploys all the code changes to a staging or a production environment after the build stage. This means that on top of automated testing, you have an automated release process, and you can deploy your applications anytime with a single button click. If you truly want to get the benefits of continuous delivery, you must deploy your changes to production as early as possible to make sure that you release small batches that are easy to troubleshoot in case of a problem. And lastly, talk about continuous deployment. It goes one step further than continuous delivery. With this practice, every change that passes across all the stages and reaches production pipeline, it is released directly to your customers. There's no human intervention unless there's a failed test that prohibits your changes from going to production. Continuous deployment is an excellent way to accelerate the feedback loop with your customers and take the pressure off your team, as there is no more release day. Developers can focus on building software and they see their work go live within minutes. So yeah, that's your the ideal test approach. And now coming to how do you set up a test center of excellence? So what do you understand by test center of excellence? That's TCoE. It is basically a strategic framework that mostly circles around process, tools, KPIs, and innovation. It plays a key role for any organization to shift its focus to a quality-first approach. Now, the steps involved in setting up a TCoE within an organization include, as you can see, it's a 5-step process. So the very first step is analyzing the business vision, priorities, needs, and challenges by doing a SWOT analysis. SWOT, for those who don't know, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Second stage is standardizing certain processes, setting proper best practices and guidelines in place, and defining KPIs for measuring performance. Third, it is important to synergize with teams to align with the business goals with a focus on quality. Fourth, sharing learnings across other business units to improvise strategies and expand accordingly. And fifth, creating dashboards to track mostly the return on investment. You can use certain CMMI which is called the capability maturity model to measure those maturity ratings, and also COCOMO for most of you who have heard. That's the constructive cost model, a part of the software development methodology. But certain challenges that most of you would face while setting up or establishing this kind of a testing center of excellence are a lot of significant amount of time and effort and money gets invested in building this up. It can often be an uphill battle with provisioning the right skills and overcoming the lack of communication. Again, you need to have the full support from the organization and commitment. Setting the direction and prioritizing the effort and task with implementing a test center of excellence are again challenging. But research proves that organizations that have adopted test center of excellence have reported that they were able to achieve 50 to 70% of automation with an average of 30% in reduction in test cycles, and also were able to limit the defect leakage to less than 2%. The next thing that we discuss is the essential metrics that are required for quality assurance. As you can see, the very first important thing is the bug efficacy. So it is important to make a note of the bugs, the total count of bugs that have been reported so far, the number of bugs that have been resolved or closed, the number of bugs that are still in the open state. They need to be prioritized accordingly and re-added to the backlog so the team can look at immediately. And lastly, the duplicate or the unreproducible or abandoned bugs, depending on how the team takes those. On the right, you can see the automation test trend over time. So it is important to keep a track of the functional tests and those that have been automated over the time period. After that, to the bottom left, you can see a number of metrics that we should generally keep a track of. That is like your entire test duration, number of defects, the automation test coverage, percent of broken builds, coverage by unit test, path coverage, irrelevant results, passed or failed test, coverage of requirements, test execution, and production defects. And on the bottom right, that you can see is the DORA metrics, which is generally used to capture metrics from the DevOps model. Again, this factors in 4 important metrics that you can see. First is the lead time. For those who don't know, I'll just quickly explain that. It describes the amount of time it takes to complete a specific process. Next is the deployment frequency. It is how often new code changes are deployed onto production. Change failure rate. It measures the percentage of deployments that result in a failure in production. And one quick example that I can maybe relate with this is like if you have 5 builds that have run and deployed your changes to production, out of which 2 failed. So your change failure rate percentage would be 40%. Lastly, you have the mean time to restore MTTR, as you can see. That is the average time it takes to recover from a product or system failure. So these are some of the essential metrics that you should keep in mind for better quality assurance. Now moving on to the next topic that would aid your team in upskilling them and transitioning into the SDET role. So as the topic goes, unlearning legacy and learning developmental models for the team to upskill. As most of you know, the QA role is one of the most common tech roles, which has seen a major evolution since the last decade. And around 70% of testing folks are still looking for the right set of courses to upgrade their skill set. Reasons are plenty: better hikes, job security, more respect, career growth, etc. But truly, how many of you are aware about the 70-20-10 learning model? The 70-20-10 model is a popular learning and developmental framework that defines 70% of learning of experiential that comes from experiences employees face at work. The 20% is more of social or peer-to-peer communication-based learning. And the final 10% is conducted through formal training sessions. And for those 10%, there are numerous ways for testers to upgrade their skills. There's LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, and various more courses which are there online. There are communities like the Test Tribe, Automation Advocates, Ministry of Testing, and various that have their own set of in-person and virtual events. There's the BrowserStack Champions, BrowserStack Test University. Then there's BlazeMeter Test University, Test Automation University, and various other courses that are readily available online, free of cost. And for those of you who started your career in software testing, I'm sure you'll know about guru99.com. And don't forget your soulmate, Google. So picking the right professionals to build an effective team for a project is definitely more challenging than it looks. It's a big responsibility and risk because the people you choose are the biggest factor to determine if your project will turn out to be a success. The more skilled and knowledgeable they are, the better your odds of success become. But in order to choose what's best for your team, what comes to your mind? So the first task would be to identify and recognize your team's strengths and weaknesses. To identify your team's strengths and weaknesses, I would recommend exploring the Gallup-Clifton's strength assessment technique, where the intensity of the talents would be measured across 34 themes. Now, these 34 themes are split across 4 major quadrants: strategic thinking, relationship building, influencing, and execution. I can definitely share the link in the chat for you all to maybe take that assessment. It generally costs around $50 approximately. And there's another technique which is called as the Johari or the Nohari window. That's another very popular technique to identify your strengths and weaknesses or to describe your nature. The next model is basically giving and receiving constructive feedback. But just before I dive deeper into that, I'd like to share certain research that has proven how people have benefited from the Clifton strengths. So generally, they get more engaged and more productive at work. They are able to achieve their goals faster. They are happier and healthier. They have greater confidence and self-awareness and a good amount of zeal and energy. And they're less likely to experience negative emotions like sadness, worry, or stress during work. So that plays a very important role when you're planning to transform your team of testers. Looking at why feedback is vital, feedback motivates, enhances your personal belonging, personal improvements. It strengthens your relationships, and moreover, employees want it. And you believe it or not, they value it the most. According to PwC, there was a very recent research that said nearly 60% of employees want feedback to be taken and given on a weekly basis. It is important for you to understand feedback is a gift. It costs time and effort to share, but when it is shared, the team is better off. So it's important to give that generously. And lastly, some of the important ways or the best techniques that I would suggest are open communication, asking the team to define their own set of SMART goals, and you're keeping a track of them. And lastly, delegating and trusting them. Some other common approaches that you can maybe explore are conducting team bonding activities, initiating a buddy program or a mentorship program, having regular one-on-ones or a skip level feedback, and sharing some business and market updates with your team. So finally, we come to the final and one of the most important topics of today's session, that is leadership styles. It is extremely important for all those leads, principal architects, and managers on this call, or above all, those individual contributors who aspire to transition into these roles someday. How would you adapt to a leadership style that you could fit in any situation? As a leader, you may want to lead from the front in a barricade storming style, or hold back and hear what the team has to say, or even withdraw entirely from view and work unseen. All such options are possible as long as it motivates the team, builds those individuals, and gets the result. There are, if you search this online, there are basically 10 leadership styles that are prevalent. Um, I'll just name them. So coach, visionary, servant, autocratic, laissez-faire, or also called as hands-off, democratic, pace setter, transformational, transactional, and bureaucratic. But don't they seem a bit quite a lot to digest? So what I've done is I've grouped them into a six-phased approach. Again, six leadership styles with a symbolic representation. So let's look at them quickly and let's understand what they signify. First one being the star. Now, star, with the name, you can understand it says strengths, teamwork, alignment, and results. Now, a person having this kind of a leadership style is more of a visionary kind or an all-rounder who shows most of the traits. The second kind of leadership trait is the guide. It could be a mother, a father, or a guide, more of a servant leader. A person who basically nurtures the team, holds them, and is very protective. Third is the tiger. As you can see from the image itself, very aggressive and fierce. He's more result-oriented, result-driven. Fourth are the geese. It's more of a distributed leadership. So when the leading goose is kind of tired, it swaps places with another member from the team. And while that person takes the role of being the lead, this person supports from the behind and recharges itself. Then we have the diamond, which is more of cutting edge coaching, assessment, and training. So more of formal processes and training driven. And finally, the most important leadership style is the queen bee. As you know, what is the role of the queen bee? It maintains the um, team balance and focuses mostly on performance. So now that I've covered all these six leadership styles and how they differ, I have a quick poll for everyone. So according to you, which leadership style do you possess? I'd like everyone to take this quick poll and let's wait for the results. All right, so we see more people have voted for the guide, equal weightage to star and queen bee. Right. I think no one likes the keys, Rahul.
Yeah, it seems a very, very unpopular choice. Yeah.
All right. So let's wait for certain more responses. I believe there are 19 folks. 20. That's good. Interesting. We see folks in the gaze leadership style as well.
Yeah. Getting more popular.
All right. So I'll leave this poll active. Just moving on to the next slide in due course of time. So here's a quote by Daniel Goleman. The best leaders don't know just one style of leadership. They're skilled at several and have the flexibility to switch between styles as the circumstances dictate. So I think with this quote, most of you understand that it is not important to have just one leadership style. You need to adapt to various leadership styles, showcase them in the right situation, in the right circumstance. And that's where I'd like to end this session for today. Um, that's basically all that I had. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope this session was insightful. Uh, a special thanks to the BrowserStack team for having me here. And yeah, over to Rahul. I believe you have.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Siddhant. That was a lovely session. I learned so much more about leadership and leading teams and kind of like some of the best practices that you shared. And I'm sure the folks on the call would have found this information very useful, and hoping they are able to leverage some of this in their day-to-day lives and within their organizations, right? So before we jump into the Q&A, there is a quick poll for everyone. This is more in terms of, if you find BrowserStack useful or want to learn more about BrowserStack, BrowserStack would reach out to you, somebody from the organization, to perhaps share more about the products, the offerings, or any other questions in any other ways that we could help you out with. So feel free to provide your answers in terms of whether you would want to be connected by BrowserStack. So with that, we would jump into the Q&A. We've got quite a few questions, Siddhant, that have popped up in the chat window. The very first one is from Pankaj Bhanushali. He asks, what's the difference between a QA architect, a testing lead, or an SDET manager?
Uh, a very good question, Pankaj. So I'd like to take that right here. Um, a QA architect, as you can see, or also known as a principal architect, it's a similar role in the engineering discipline as well, as most of you would know. So QA architect is more of who looks at the overall architecture wise, who makes those strategic decisions for testing. Uh, Maybe someone who is responsible for setting up the test center of excellence within your team. Whereas if you compare him with a testing lead, he would kind of set the framework, keep a focus on the tools and stuff. An estate manager is who would play a vital role in managing teams across um, have the communications flow in across developers, testers, product managers, and accordingly, like at a managerial role, he would play an important role. QA architect and the testing lead are more towards the individual contributor side.
Great.
So hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thanks, Siddhant. The next one is from Pradeep Behra, and he talks about what's the concept of micro front end. How is it different from microservices?
Again, interesting. So those who know about microservices, it's more on the backend layer, and micro front ends are basically a similar concept of microservices, but on the front end side. So the way you would split your backend into multiple microservices, your front end is now split into micro front ends. So this is the new norm which is formed. It was again a term which was coined back in 2013 by ThoughtWorks and again used by 2016. I do have a session on micro front ends and how do you test them better. So what I can do is I can share the link and I'll let you explore. And if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me offline. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Siddhant. The next one from Varun Magao. He asks, what is the definition of in-sprint automation for your team? Does all sprint functionalities need to be automated in the same sprint with no manual testing involved?
Okay. This is an interesting question, and Varun, again, this could totally differ based on your project needs, your business requirements. So it totally depends if you're if you have the bandwidth and if you're able to work in that in-sprint automation manner, then it is ideal that as at least most of the critical flows need to be automated. That should be your top priority. And it depends on how your sprints are like divided. So we follow a bi-weekly model where we have releases during the 2-week sprint cycle. And for us, it's like manual testing needs to be there. There's no chance that manual testing cannot be there, like I covered in my slides. But at the same time, while you're getting the fixes from the developers, you have that leeway in between. So that's where you can at least start automating certain API test cases. If you have more time, you can start with the UI test cases, and that's where in-sprint automation plays an important role.
Awesome. We have a few more questions, Siddhant, but I'll probably skip to one towards the end, which is a little less technical, but I really love the question. It's from Sagar Deshpande. He
Sure.
asks, how do you motivate 1-year experienced person to move towards SDET while still working as a manual engineer? So I found it very interesting and would love to hear your thoughts on this.
This is definitely interesting because a 1-year experience is still kind of trying to figure out his path, his journey. So more of motivation, I would say that it is like if I go back to my topic where I'm talking about my life's experiences, and I focus on the second point, which was self-initiative to learn, grow, and excel, if you can recollect. So that's where you need to play an important role first and realize that what is important for you. Is manual testing going to help you in the long run, or are you willing to contribute towards automation, learn different tech stacks, get more of interactions with the developers, and think from a business perspective how your role will play an important role contributing back towards the organization. So that's back to you.
Yeah. No, great answer. And then one more thing that I would probably want to share before, going back to the last question, just the fact that we are probably a minute or so left. For the folks who perhaps, found this interesting, we have a kind of like a summit that we are coming up with in a few weeks' time. We do call it the QA Leadership Summit. It's on the 7th of December. And we have, just like Siddhant did one session, we have a series of 4 to 5 sessions that we do on a single day. It also features our CTO and our co-founder, Nakul, who talks about QA and elevating the role of QA professionals. And of course, an opportunity for you to engage and network with a lot of leading industry consultants, BrowserStack leaders, and of course, customers like Siddhant. So would love for you to perhaps, check our next session out. As I said, it's a QA Leadership Summit coming up very soon on the 7th of December. So with that, we are on time. Would love to thank each and every one of you for your time today. Hope you found Siddhant's session useful. There are quite a few questions that are still here in the chat window. We'll work with Siddhant to get those answered, and we'll try to send those over to you via email. So with that, wanted to thank you once again for your time, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Any last words from you, Siddhant, before we call it a day?
I think I'm good. So just thank you everyone for joining, and see you soon.
Great. Thanks again, Siddhant, for your time and this great session. Looking forward to doing a lot more sessions with you in the future.
Thanks a lot, Rahul.
Great. Thanks, guys.